In this video, I'm going to show an approach to prevent characters getting jittery in the game. Okay, so I've got my game over here. I can move my characters like so, but the character, after I build my project, sometimes it can just be a little bit jittery when I move my character. Okay, so I explore quite a few approaches in terms of how to make movements on a character. So let me just bring up my project. Okay, yeah, basically I found there are many approaches in terms of how to make it work for moving characters. One of them is to change the velocity of a game object. That's my character. So basically you can sort of like do it in this particular way. Okay, so you have the input, which is like 1 minus 1 or 0 times the speed, and then basically you apply this vector 3 into the velocity. That sets up the speed and the direction about where the character moves. Okay, so that's approach number one. Approach number two is actually adding force to the rigid body. Okay, so that's approach number two. Approach number three is using translate. Okay, so I found these three approaches, and there are pros and cons related to each. The first one, the velocity one, you do get this slight jittery result when you have your game set up without having certain things configured properly. Okay, so then I learned from a particular video which I'm gonna put in the chat later, in the description later. Basically, the guy explains that you need to set something into your rigid body, which is this particular setting. Okay, so interpolation, you need to set that to interpolate. Okay, interpolate. Okay, so if you use FixedUpdate, and then in my case, I have to use FixedUpdate in conjunction with this particular setting, then I can avoid jittery. Okay, so that's how I solve this problem. So if you use velocity, you might end up having to do it this particular way. If you use rigid body at force, the problem is it just keeps accelerating when you hit when you keep moving the character. It just keeps accelerating. So that's the approach that I wouldn't like to use. So when you sort of like, let's say when you're developing a car racing game, you hit the button and then the car keeps moving, keeps accelerating. That's probably a good approach when you using AddForce to solve that problem. The third approach is using translate, which is actually just moving that particular object. Okay, so you can do like a translate and then basically set the position, but you need to use the Time.deltaTime to help solving that problem. I wouldn't go into details, but the problem with this particular approach is when you hit the particular object, when you have collision, then you suddenly lose control. Okay, so that's a basic approach, which is probably not going to work most of the time, because 9 times out of 10 you need to set up your collision at the time you hit something or something happens, then basically something occurs. So this particular approach doesn't work for me. However, this approach just works straight away with the it doesn't have any jittery at all. Okay, so that's my experience when I use this approach. So then I kept exploring, and then I realized that's the best approach for me. So in order to solve the jittery, I needed to set interpolation. Okay, so to show that in the game, basically interpretation is this particular configuration over here. Okay, I think that in code. However, if you have a rigid body, if you want to set it up over here, that's absolutely fine. They are the same. Okay, so without setting this in my game, running it in development mode, it seems to be okay. However, after I build my project, when I run that in like production mode, however you call it, basically the character starts having lots of problems when you try to move the character around. Basically, it's just not smooth at all. Right. So yeah, that's basically it.